Egypt, the land of the Pharaohs, the Great Pyramids, and one of the world's oldest civilizations. Nestled along the banks of the Nile, this ancient country has been the birthplace of empires, the cradle of culture, and the heart of history for millennia. From the construction of the pyramids to the rise of mighty dynasties, the story of Egypt is not just the story of a nation, but of humanity itself. Throughout this journey, we'll explore Egypt's civilization, delve into its golden ages, witness its decline and revival, and uncover the last Muslim conquest. Long before the rise of pharaohs and pyramids, Egypt was home to early human settlements that date back tens of thousands of years. The Nile River, with its annual floods, created a fertile land that allowed agriculture to flourish. This river would become the lifeblood of Egypt, shaping its culture, economy, and beliefs. As early as 10,000 BCE, small communities began to emerge along the Nile. These early Egyptians, though primitive in comparison to their later successors, laid the foundations for one of the world's most enduring civilizations. By 5000 BCE, the first settlements had formed into more complex societies. The people of Egypt developed farming techniques, and the domestication of animals allowed for more settled communities. Yet these early Egyptians were still bound by the unpredictable nature of the Nile. Their survival depended on understanding the river's seasonal cycles, which would later lead to the Egyptians' religious belief in the gods of nature. As the millennia passed, the settlements along the Nile grew stronger, and Egypt began to unify under a single ruler. Around 3100 BCE, the legendary King Narmer, also known as Menes, united Upper and Lower Egypt, becoming the first pharaoh of the first dynasty. This marked the beginning of a powerful civilization that would last for over 3,000 years. Narmer's unification of Egypt laid the foundation for the Old Kingdom, which is often called the Age of the Pyramids, and saw Egypt reach the height of its architectural and cultural achievements. During this period, the most iconic structure of all was constructed, the Great Pyramid of Giza. Built for the pharaoh Khufu, also known as Cheops, it stood as the tallest man-made structure in the world for over 3,800 years. The pyramids were not merely tombs, they were symbols of divine power. The pharaoh, considered a god on earth, was believed to be the intermediary between the gods and the people. His role was to ensure Ma'at, the divine order, was maintained. In death, the pharaoh would journey to the afterlife, where the pyramids were meant to assist in his eternal existence. Along with the pyramids, this period also saw the flourishing of art, writing, and architecture. The Egyptians developed a unique system of writing, hieroglyphs, used to record history, religious texts, and laws. Art from the period is characterized by its formality and adherence to strict rules, with a focus on order and stability. However, the grandeur of the Old Kingdom was not to last forever. By 2055 BCE, Mentuhotep II, beginning of the Middle Kingdom, which would last until 1650 BCE. This era marked a new phase of stability and cultural achievement. Mentuhotep II re-established centralized control and oversaw a golden age of culture, art, and architecture. The Middle Kingdom also saw advancements in literature and philosophy, with the creation of some of Egypt's earliest written wisdom literature, such as the Instruction of Amenemhat, a text offering advice to a future ruler. The artistic achievements of the Middle Kingdom were remarkable, with elaborate tombs and statues that depicted pharaohs and their officials in more humanized forms than before. By 1550 BCE, Egypt entered its most powerful and prosperous phase, the New Kingdom. This was a time of military conquest, extraordinary building projects, and profound changes in religion and politics. The New Kingdom was marked by the reign of some of Egypt's most famous pharaohs. Hatshepsut, one of the few female pharaohs, oversaw a prosperous reign, during which she expanded trade routes and built magnificent temples, most notably the Temple of Deir el-Bahari. However, the most controversial ruler of this period was Akhenaten, who introduced a monotheistic worship of the sun god Aten. This dramatic shift in religious practice caused turmoil and would not survive his reign. Despite the turmoil caused by Akhenaten's religious reforms, the wealth and splendor of the new kingdom continued to grow. But his successor, the young pharaoh Tutankhamun, returned to the traditional polytheistic beliefs of Egypt. The greatest of all pharaohs during the New Kingdom was Ramses II, also known as Ramses the Great. He is famous for his military campaigns and monumental building projects, including the temples at Abu Simbel. Under Ramses II, Egypt reached its greatest territorial extent. Egypt's empire stretched from the Euphrates River in the north to Nubia in the south, making it the most powerful empire in the ancient world at the time. Despite the military successes and the wealth brought by territorial expansion, the new kingdom's end was not without challenges, as Egypt faced internal turmoil, giving way to a period of fragmentation. To reiterate, this unification of Upper and Lower Egypt brought with it a sense of stability. The Old Kingdom was a period of centralized power, with the pharaohs seen as both divine rulers and political authorities. The unity of the nation was symbolized through monumental architecture, the most famous of which were the pyramids. Under Pharaoh Djoser, the step pyramid at Saqqara was constructed, the first large stone structure in Egypt's history. This was the precursor to the grand scale of the later pyramids. Djoser's architect, Imhotep, is often considered one of the world's first engineers, a testament to the sophisticated knowledge Egyptians possessed in mathematics, engineering, and design. However, it was under the Fourth Dynasty that the true giants of Egypt's architectural prowess were realized. Pharaoh Khufu, also known as Cheops, embarked on the creation of the Great Pyramid of Giza, an engineering marvel that would stand as the tallest man-made structure for millennia. Over 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing several tons, were transported and placed with such precision that even modern technology struggles to replicate its accuracy. These pyramids were not merely tombs for the pharaohs, they were symbols of divine power and immortality. Egyptian religion centered around the belief in an afterlife, where the pharaoh's journey would be safeguarded by the gods. But as the centuries passed, the central power of the pharaohs started to weaken, with regional leaders gaining more autonomy, leading to political instability. After the fall of the Old Kingdom, Egypt descended into chaos during the First Intermediate Period. A divided Egypt, ruled by regional leaders, found itself in a state of unrest. It was Mentuhotep II who reunified Egypt and began the Middle Kingdom. Mentuhotep's reign marked the beginning of a new era. Unlike his predecessors, the Middle Kingdom pharaohs sought not just military conquest, but a return to the ideals of the Old Kingdom, with an emphasis on governance, culture, and religious order. Furthermore, the Middle Kingdom witnessed a significant cultural flourishing. In literature, we see the emergence of wisdom literature, with texts such as the Instructions of Amenemhat, offering political and moral advice to future rulers. The pharaohs of this period also commissioned magnificent temples and tombs that demonstrated not just their wealth, but their connection to the gods. Despite these achievements, Egypt's security was often challenged by foreign invaders, particularly the Semitic-speaking peoples from the Levant and the Nubians to the south. As a result, Egypt began to expand its military influence, particularly into Nubia, where it established trade routes and sought to control valuable resources like gold. Egypt's weakening political cohesion allowed the Hyksos, a Semitic people from Asia, to invade and take control of Lower Egypt. This represents the zenith of ancient Egyptian civilization. Beginning with the reign of Ahmoses I, who drove out the Hyksos, the Semitic invaders, Egypt entered a new era of territorial expansion and consolidation. Under Pharaoh Ahmose I, Egypt restored its dominance over its territory, defeating the Hyksos and reuniting the country. His victory set the stage for a series of powerful pharaohs whose influence reached across the ancient world. One of the first major achievements of the new kingdom was the reign of Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's most remarkable rulers. Ascending to power as regent for her young stepson, Thutmose III, she eventually took on the full title of pharaoh and ruled in her own right. Hatshepsut's reign is often considered a golden age of trade. She sent expeditions to the land of Punt, bringing back gold, incense, and exotic goods. She also embarked on an ambitious building program, erecting monumental structures like her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, a stunning architectural achievement. The period of Akhenaten, however, marked a radical shift in Egypt's religious practices. Akhenaten, originally named Amenhotep IV, introduced monotheism to Egypt by focusing worship on Aten, the sun disk, rather than the traditional pantheon of gods. His devotion to Aten led to the construction of a new capital, Akhetaten, modern-day Amarna, and the abandonment of the ancient capital, Thebes. However, Akhenaten's religious reforms were not widely accepted. His successor, the boy king Tutankhamun, reinstated traditional religious practices. Though he died young, Tutankhamun's tomb, discovered nearly intact in 1922, provided one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, revealing the wealth and splendor of the New Kingdom. The most famous of all New Kingdom pharaohs was Ramses II, also known as Ramses the Great. His reign lasted an astonishing 66 years, from 1279 to 1213 BCE, and was marked by military triumphs, extensive building projects, and a significant expansion of Egypt's influence. Ramses II fought the famous Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites, and though the battle ended in a stalemate, he portrayed it as a great victory. His reign was also characterized by a massive building program, including the construction of the colossal temples at Abu Simbel, carved into the rock to commemorate his divine rule. However, the greatness of Egypt could not last forever. After the death of Ramses II, Egypt's military strength began to wane. Successive pharaohs faced increasing pressure from external threats and internal instability. The Nubians from the south, the Assyrians from the north, and the Persians from the east all took turns dominating Egypt. The once unified and powerful nation was now divided into smaller regions ruled by local warlords, priests, and foreign invaders. Egypt was no longer the supreme power of the ancient world. The monumental era of the New Kingdom came to an end, and the country faced a series of challenges that would lead to centuries of instability. The Third Intermediate Period, which lasted from around 1070 to 664 BCE, was marked by political fragmentation and foreign invasions. No longer unified under a single powerful ruler, Egypt was divided into competing regions. During this period, the power of the pharaohs diminished, and Egypt's once central governance system splintered. Local rulers, or priests of Amun, began to gain power, especially in Thebes, while the Delta region was controlled by military leaders and other regional kings. This decentralization of power contributed to Egypt's vulnerability to external threats. Among the most significant invaders of this period were the Libyans, who established their own dynasty in the Nile Delta. The Libyan dynasty ruled Egypt for nearly 2 centuries, and while they maintained many of Egypt's traditional structures, their reign was a time of internal turmoil and regional conflict. Despite these challenges, Egypt's cultural and religious traditions continued to thrive. The Libyan rulers adopted Egyptian customs and Egypt's religious practices, particularly the worship of the god Amun, remained central to Egyptian life. However, the Egyptian military, once the envy of the ancient world, began to suffer due to a lack of centralized leadership. By the 8th century BCE, Egypt faced an invasion from the mighty Assyrian Empire, led by Tiglath-Pileser III and later Sargon II. The Assyrians' military prowess was unmatched, and they quickly overwhelmed Egypt's defenses. The Assyrian Empire briefly established a protectorate over Egypt, but this did not last long. Egypt once again fell to foreign domination, this time under the control of the Nubian kings of Kush. The Kushites, from the kingdom of Nubia to the south, not only took control of Egypt, but also established the 25th dynasty. Despite their foreign origins, the Nubians embraced Egypt's culture and religion, ruling as pharaohs with a deep reverence for Egypt's ancient traditions. Under the rule of the Nubian pharaoh Pi, Egypt saw a brief revival of its glory days. Pi restored unity to Egypt and reasserted the traditional religious practices that had been disrupted by foreign invaders. However, this resurgence was short-lived, as Egypt's fate would soon be sealed by further foreign invasions. The late period of ancient Egypt, beginning around 664 BCE, marked the final phase of Egypt's independence before it became a province of foreign empires. This period saw Egypt governed by a series of foreign invaders, most notably the Persians, but it also witnessed one of Egypt's last native dynasties. The Sate dynasty was founded by Psamtik I, who managed to regain control of Egypt after the fall of the Nubian dynasty. During his reign, Egypt experienced a brief but significant revival, restoring order and stability. However, Egypt's newfound prosperity came at a cost. The rise of the Persian Empire in the east posed a constant threat to Egyptian independence. The Persian king Cambyses II conquered Egypt in 530 BCE, ending the Sate dynasty and annexing Egypt into the Persian Empire. Egypt's autonomy was again compromised as it became part of the vast Persian Empire. The Persians ruled Egypt through local governors, but Egypt's traditional religious and cultural identity remained a strong force. Despite this, Egypt's influence was waning as the Persians expanded their empire into Greece and beyond. By the time of the Greek conquests, marking the beginning of a new chapter in Egypt's long history. In 332 BCE, Alexander the Great, having conquered much of the known world, entered Egypt as a liberator. The Egyptians welcomed him as a liberator, and he was hailed for freeing them from Persian rule. His conquest would change Egypt forever. After Alexander's death in 323 BCE, his vast empire was divided among his generals, and Egypt was given to one of them, Ptolemy Sota. Ptolemy, a former general under Alexander, established the Ptolemaic dynasty, which would rule Egypt for nearly 3 centuries. The Ptolemies were Greek in origin, but adopted many aspects of Egyptian culture. They presented themselves as pharaohs and sought to blend Greek and Egyptian traditions. This fusion is most clearly seen in the city of Alexandria, which Ptolemy I founded. Alexandria quickly became one of the most important cultural and intellectual centers of the ancient world. Under the Ptolemies, Egypt flourished economically and culturally. The Ptolemaic rulers invested heavily in the infrastructure of Egypt, building monumental structures and commissioning works of art. The city of Alexandria became a symbol of learning and culture, with its famous Library of Alexandria housing scrolls from across the known world. However, the Ptolemaic dynasty faced constant internal strife and external threats. While the early Ptolemaic kings, such as Ptolemy II Philadelphus, were able to maintain peace and prosperity, later rulers were often embroiled in political intrigue, assassination plots, and power struggles. The most famous of the Ptolemaic rulers was Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt. Cleopatra came to the throne in 51 BCE, and her reign is marked by political alliances with powerful Roman leaders, including Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Cleopatra's relationships with these Roman leaders are legendary, and she played a pivotal role in the political drama of the late Roman Republic. Her ambitions, however, were ultimately thwarted. In 30 BCE, following the defeat of Mark Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium by Octavian, later Augustus, Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. Cleopatra committed suicide, and with her death, the Ptolemaic dynasty came to an end. Thus, Egypt's ancient monarchy was replaced by Roman rule. The land that had once been the cradle of civilization was now a province of the mighty Roman Empire, marking the end of an era. After the death of Cleopatra in 30 BCE, Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. For the Romans, Egypt was not just a strategic territory, it was an economic powerhouse. The rich soil of the Nile Delta made it the empire's breadbasket, supplying Rome with vast quantities of grain, a crucial resource for feeding its population. Under Roman rule, Egypt was treated as an important part of the empire. While it remained a key source of grain, the political and administrative power in Egypt was directly controlled by the Roman emperor. Egypt was governed by Gaius Cornelius Gallus, appointed by Augustus. Though Egypt was officially a part of the Roman Empire, the Egyptians continued to hold on to their deep-rooted cultural and religious practices. The worship of Egyptian gods persisted, especially in the form of the ancient religions surrounding Isis, Osiris, and Horus. The grandeur of Egyptian temples, like those at Karnak and Philae, still dominated the landscape, and many Roman emperors, including Augustus and Tiberius, embraced Egyptian religious traditions. However, the Roman Empire's control over Egypt was not always peaceful. Egyptian society, deeply entrenched in its own traditions, often struggled with Roman authority. There were occasional uprisings and revolts against Roman rule, such as those led by the Egyptian Queen Cleopatra's remaining supporters in the early years of Roman control. But by the 1st century CE, the Roman presence was firmly established, and Egypt's internal governance was incorporated into Rome's larger bureaucratic system. As the centuries passed, Egypt underwent another profound transformation. In 395 CE, the Roman Empire was formally divided into two halves: the Western Roman Empire, based in Rome, and the Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, based in Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. Egypt, now part of the Eastern Roman Empire, saw increasing religious and political changes. Christianity began to spread across Egypt in the 1st and 2nd centuries CE, but it was in the 4th century that it became a dominant force. Emperor Constantine's Edict of Milan in 313 CE legalized Christianity, and the religion began to gain official support within the Roman Empire. Egypt, which had long been home to a rich array of religious beliefs, saw many ancient traditions give way to Christian monotheism. By the late 4th century, Egypt became one of the key centers of early Christianity. The Egyptian city of Alexandria played an especially crucial role in the development of Christian theology, and this caused a decline of traditional Egyptian religious practices, including the worship of the ancient gods, and the temples of Egypt was seen as a profound cultural loss. The temples that had once stood as symbols of Egypt's ancient glory were systematically closed and repurposed by the Christian authorities. The famous Temple of Serapis in Alexandria was destroyed in 391 CE, marking the end of one of Egypt's greatest centers of pagan worship. Despite these religious upheavals, Egypt's Christian population continued to grow, and by the 5th and 6th centuries, the country was predominantly Christian. The Christian Church also had a strong influence on Egyptian politics, with bishops wielding considerable power. In 641 CE, General Amr ibn al-As, under the command of Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, led the Muslim forces into Egypt. After a series of fierce battles and the strategic sieging of Alexandria, the city ultimately fell to the Arabs. The city of Alexandria, once the intellectual and cultural heart of the ancient Mediterranean world, was now under Arab control. However, the Arab conquest of Egypt was not just a military campaign. It was also a profound cultural and religious transformation. The Arabs, inspired by their new faith of Islam, began to bring their religion, language, and governance to Egypt. Christianity, the dominant religion of Egypt for centuries, remained influential, but Islam would gradually become the dominant force in Egypt. Amr ibn al-As founded the city of Fustat, now modern-day Cairo. Fustat would become the center of Islamic rule in Egypt, replacing Alexandria as the focal point of the country's political, economic, and military life. Following the conquest, Egypt became part of the larger Arab-Muslim world, initially under the rule of the Rashidun Caliphate, followed by the Umayyad and Abbasid Caliphates. These early centuries saw the Arab world expand rapidly, and Egypt played a critical role as a vital source of grain for the growing Muslim empire. The Islamic period in Egypt brought with it profound changes to the country's religious landscape. Under Islamic rule, Egypt became one of the key centers of Islamic learning and culture, producing scholars, philosophers, and poets who would shape the entire Muslim world. During this period, Egypt's economy was heavily tied to trade. The Nile's annual flooding still supported agriculture, but Egypt also became a major trade route connecting the Mediterranean to Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. This trade brought immense wealth to Egypt, enriching its cities, particularly Fustat and later Cairo. By 969 CE, a new wave of change came with the rise of the Fatimid Caliphate, a Shia Muslim dynasty that established its rule over Egypt after defeating the Abbasids. The Fatimids shifted the political and cultural landscape of Egypt once again, building a new city, Cairo, on the banks of the Nile. Cairo would rise to prominence as one of the greatest cities in the Islamic world. The Fatimids established Cairo as their capital, and it quickly grew into a thriving center of trade, culture, and religion. The new city of Cairo became a beacon of Islamic culture and a hub for learning. Under the Fatimids, Egypt enjoyed a period of cultural and intellectual flourishing. Cairo became one of the most important cities in the Muslim world. Yet despite centuries of foreign domination, Egypt's deep-rooted cultural traditions, its language, its religious practices, and its intellectual achievements endured, forming the foundation for the Egypt we know today. Thank you for joining us in exploring the history of Egypt. Leave us your comment, hit the notification bell, and subscribe to stay connected with more stories from the ancient world.